Chapter 4 review, part 2. Just make this bigger. Okay, negative exponents. Now we need to take that idea of fractional exponents and, well, now we know we can have negative exponents. So negative exponents, you have to remember a couple of steps. One, you're going to flip the number and change the sign of the exponent. Flip the number and change, oh, what's going on with my pen here? Change So the rule with negative exponents is you're going to flip the number and change the sign of the exponent. Sometimes you'll have negative exponents in final answers, which we can't have, so we have to change that. So another kind of rule to remember when you're sort of at the end point or the end step is to just move those negative exponents into the opposite part of the fraction and change the sign. So or move to opposite part of the fraction and change the exponent sign. And when we get to those examples, you'll see what that kind of means. So here, the fourth root, or sorry, the 4 to the power of negative 1 over 2. Now the negative tells me I have to flip the number. So my first step is, in this case, well, I don't have 4 as a fraction, so I want it as a fraction. So I'm going to make 4 a fraction. I'm just going to put it 4 over 1. Negative 1 over 2. Nothing different yet except make 4 a fraction, because we know that any number can actually be a fraction over 1. We just never write it there. So now I have a fraction. My negative exponent, the negative tells me I need to flip that fraction. So this becomes 1 over 4. And this is raised to the power of 1/2. And then what that 1/2 applies into both onto the 1 and onto the 4. So this becomes 1 to the power of 1/2 over 4 to the power of 1/2. Well, 1 to the power of 1/2 is the square root of 1. 4 to the power of 1/2 is the square root of 4. Well, the square root of 1 is 1, and the square root of 4 is 2. And there's my final answer. Now, lots of intermediate steps there. If you understand them fully and you can skip some of those, please feel free to go ahead and do so, but be very, very careful. Okay. Second example, 125 to the negative 125 over 343 to the negative 2 over 3. Well, the negative 2 over 3 tells me that first step is I need to flip the fraction, which is good because I already have a fraction. I don't have to worry about changing that at all. So I flip that internal fraction. It becomes 343 over 125, all raised to the power of 2/3. And then that 2/3 can be applied to the 343 as well as the 125. And then I'm looking for the cube root of, flower power, cube root of 343. And of course that's going to be squared over the cube root of 125. Of course that's going to be squared. I'm not going to square those two big numbers first and then find the cube root because they're huge numbers. And I've done this a number of times. You should be at the point where you could recognize that the cube root of 125 is 5. 343 might be a little bit tougher to know, but the cube root of 125 is 5. Cube root of 343. If you wanted to, you would break that down using prime factorization. You would go 3 times, cube root of 343 is going to be 7 times 7 times 7. And of course that's going to go squared. You can do the same for the 125 on the bottom, which is 5 times 5 times 5. Of course you're doing this separate so that you can track your work. And then the cube root of 7 times 7 times 7 is 7. And that's going to be squared over 5. And that's also going to be squared, which I forgot to write there. Squared. And final answer, 49 over 25. And then of course you would see if that reduced. In this case, I know that it doesn't, so final answer. Now, remember this rule here. Move opposite part of the fraction and change the exponent sign. Okay? So down here in our next example, actually, I think I missed a word or two there. Move to the opposite part of the fraction and change the exponent sign. And exponent sign changes. Let's do that. So it's not negative anymore. Sorry, I missed a word there. Hope that didn't cause too many people some grief. 1 over 2 to the power of negative 3. Simply stated, because I have a negative, so if we're thinking that this might be a final answer, because I have a negative in my fraction, I don't want that. I can't have negative exponents in a fraction. So this is on the bottom already. So this negative exponent pushes this term to the top. So this becomes 2, changes the exponent sign to the power of 3. And 2 to the power of 3 is just 8. That would be my final answer. Now mathematically, the steps are completely different. That's a shortcut. Mathematically, this is what we have. We have 1 over 2 to the power of negative 3, which is 1 over 2 over 1 to the power of negative 3, which is 1 over 2 to the power of 3. So all I've done is made that to a fraction, and I've now flipped it and I've changed my exponent sign. So now this becomes 1 over 1 cubed over 2 cubed. So now I'm just applying that exponent into that bracket. I should change the size of my pen tip here. Maybe it might be easier to read. Equals 1 over 1. 1 cubed is 1. 2 cubed is 8. 1 over 8. Well, I can't have fractions in fractions because that just looks ugly. What does that actually mean though? It means 1 divided by 1 over 8, which is 1 over 1 divided by 1 over 8. And if you remember your rules for dividing fractions, you have to change it to multiplication. So this is multiplication, and I have to flip the second fraction, multiply by the reciprocal, which is 8 over 1. Multiply straight across the top, that's 8. Straight across the bottom, that's 1, or just 8. So long-winded explanation on why that works is right there. The short version, if you have a negative exponent, move it to the other side of the exponent, the other part of the fraction, and change the sign. 4.6, the fun part of chapter 4. I find it the fun part of chapter 4. Exponent laws. So now we take that idea of negative fractional exponents and apply it to all of that stuff that we have from last year, all of our different exponent laws. So the power of product of powers, where I can say, hey, you know what, if I have the same base and I'm multiplying them, then I add the exponents. Quotient of powers, well, if I'm dividing, I'm going to subtract the exponents. Power of a power, well, if I have power to a power, it's going to be multiplication. Power of product, these two, power of product and power of quotient, are just extensions of the power to power rule. Because really, you're just applying that power in. It's a power raised to a power, except that, whoops, what we don't see is the tiny little power of 1 written here on both of these. So a power to power, you multiply. And that's how we get our answer here. And it's the same for the power of products. There's little 1s here. We just never write them. But we multiply this in to get what we our expanded form. So then we just have to take that and apply it to the questions that we are now doing with fractional exponents. This one here, I didn't give you any fractions, but if I wanted to make this question nastier, I would put some fractions in here. Let's just, for example, say 2 over 3, and also make this a fraction of something as well. And that would just be mean and nasty. You might get some of those in the questions you work with. You might get the odd one on the test or the quiz. But for the most part, I'm looking to see if you can understand the basis of the rules, not necessarily know the mathematics behind adding and subtracting and multiplying fractions, which you should know already. So here we have this question. It's very long-winded if I was to repeat the question, so I'm not going to. What I am going to say, though, is I can see that within each of these groups, I have this, which I know I can simplify a little bit. I have this I can simplify before I apply this power in. So I'm going to do that first. Same with here. I'm going to simplify this, and I'm going to simplify this. Then I'm going to apply this power into this bracket. Then, once I've got both of those, I will combine the two as my final step. So first step, I'm going to simplify a to the negative 2 divided by a cubed. A to the negative 2 divided by a cubed is going to be a to the negative 2 minus 3. Because they're the same base, I'm subtracting the exponents. B to the 4th divided by b to the negative 2 is going to be to the 4th minus a minus 2. And of course that's all going to be raised to the power of negative 3. I have a cubed, which is going to be a to the 3 minus 6. And b cubed divided by b to the negative 2 is going to be b to the power of 3 minus a minus 2. Of course, all raised to the minus 5. Here, minus 2 minus 3, that's going to be plus a negative, so that's going to be a to the power of negative 5. b, 4 minus a minus 2 minus a minus is a plus positive, so that's b to the power of 6, all raised to the negative 3. A to the 3 minus 6, 3 minus 6 is going to be negative 3. B to the 3 minus a minus 2, that's plus a positive, so that's b to the power of 5, all raised to the power of negative 5. Now I'm going to apply those exponents in. I'm going to multiply this in here. Powers to a power you multiply. Same here. Powers to a power you multiply. So I got a to the power of negative 5 times negative 3 is positive 15. B to the power of 6 times negative 3 is b to the power of negative 18. A to the power of negative 3 times negative 5 is positive 15. B to the power of 5 times negative 5 is b to the power of negative 25. And then I'm going to combine these together. I have an a term here, and an a term here, and a b term, and a b term. When I'm multiplying, I'm adding fractions. So see how I'm remembering all of those rules. A to the power of 15 plus 15. B to the power of negative 18 minus 25. While 15 and 15 is 30. B to the power of negative 18 minus or plus a negative 25, I suppose is proper terminology, plus negative 25 is going to be negative 30, 43. So there's my answer, but I have a negative exponent. Remember that the rule is put it in the bottom or the opposite part of the fraction. There's my fraction over 1. So I'm going to move this b to the negative 43 to the bottom. This is going to become a to the power of 30 over b to the power of 43. Chapter 4 review. Chapter 4 in a nutshell. Remember though, there's a lot of other little things. This was meant to be the main bulk of the information from chapter 4, not necessarily an all-knowing, all-showing, all-revealing review. Okay, lots and lots and lots of practice. It's the only way you can start to get a handle on all of these different things. Okay, we'll see you in class.